And this newest song, Drown Fountain, I've been at a loss with what to do with it. But I was turned on to the music of this band Soft Cult from Canada, and Mercedes' voice just was,
So pretty.
it spoke to me, like to my core, and I became such a fan.
So, Courtney, both of us were brought up in households where our parents were teachers.
Mhm.
And I think one thing that we've both come to learn over our 20 odd years in the profession is that teachers beget teachers.
They do. A
Um,
long, long line of teachers.
so, do you think that there is a built-in pressure when your parent has a certain job to follow in their footsteps?
I think there definitely can be. I don't know that there there was like a pressure for me to become a teacher, but I was around teachers my whole life, and so it was something that I was like innately good at, and I don't know if it was because I was just like an innately good teacher or because I was around so many good teachers. Like my grandfather was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, my dad is a teacher. Um, I have just so many of my cousins and whatnot became teachers. There are so many teachers in my family, so I don't know if it's something that just I became good at and was recognized in me, and then that was something that I knew was just there, or it was something that people saw, like you know, chicken or egg. Like I'm not sure what came first.
Well, and I think it's interesting because I think I kind of had slightly the opposite experience, not in a bad way by any means. I think that, my mom, who just retired from the classroom after 52 years, I think there was I felt at times an obligation to become a teacher. My mom took me into her classroom a lot when I was a kid on the weekends and during summer for summer school. So there was always an opportunity for me to be around teaching. And I think it just kind of became the duh, I'm going to become a teacher. So I don't know if there was a pressure to it, but there was definitely a grooming of an educator. And I think I think one of the cool things about today's guest is that he grew up in a situation where his parent was definitely a lifelong, was definitely in his career for a lifetime. And so it'll be interesting to see how that translated for Jay Weinberg,
I'm so
who
excited to hear from him today.
so excited to have him as a guest and talk about everything from the touring life and childhood and hardcore punk rock, which is, I know, one of his absolute loves. So
What
we
he's doing today.
we are really excited to find out all about him today. So welcome to CASSINGLES, guys.
I'm Courtney Dawn.
I'm Chris Margolin.
It's gonna be a wild ride.
Absolutely is, guys. Follow along. Thank you so much.
Hang on.
All right.
Ooh.
Hello, hello. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, how you both doing?
Doing all
Great,
right.
welcome. I'm Courtney Dawn.
I'm Chris
Hi, Courtney.
Margolin.
Hey, Chris. All
Uh,
right,
you,
good to see
you've
you
got
both.
a nice time alone now. No baby with you at the moment.
Baby's either feeding or asleep at the moment. Yeah, we trying both right now.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, we're psyched. Thanks.
Very, very
You getting
cool.
sleep?
When we can, it's all those things that you hear of just, it's a whole new way of life, a whole new life for myself and my wife. So, we're rolling with it. We're very happy. Sleep is harder to come by than usual, but like, I feel like as musicians, like you're just kind of used to not really sleeping all that great anyway. So
Yeah.
it's par for the course.
100%. You just
Yeah, I'm
roll
okay.
with it and then you
Yeah,
find
we're
the
cool.
small joys. There's so much to like revel in.
Yeah, yeah, we've
We've
been
got a 15-year-old. So
all right.
there are still joys,
They're
then
different
there's
joys
like
now.
driving now. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
there's
Uh-huh.
different things.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really trying to soak up all the time that I can with her right now.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So, we like to start off a little bit earlier. We always feel like we know our guests, obviously, from the spotlight, they've been in for their careers. But what was it like to be a 5-year-old Jay Weinberg who's looking at some type of kindergarten and figuring out life?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, 5 years old was actually that was about when I started to discover, like, as far as music goes, that's when I discovered like rock bands and guitar-based music and such. I hadn't really heard anything in that realm until I was about like 5 years old. My mom really loves classical music. She has her whole life, and my grandpa, who I never met, was a classically trained pianist.
Oh wow.
And what I find interesting about him is that he was kind of both like sides right brain and left brain, where he was a pianist, but he was also in the Signal Corps in World War II. So he was like a scientist, but also an artist. And all I heard until I was 5 years old was like all classical music. Which I understand, like there have been studies that like brain patterns of like classical musicians are kind of similar to those of like heavy metal musicians, just thinking about the complexity and
Yep.
layers, depth of the music and stuff, that it takes similar types of ways of thinking about music, I guess. But yeah, when I was five, that's when I discovered rock and roll really for the first time. That's when my parents, I started getting some hand-me-downs from my parents because I think they felt I was like old enough to maybe start having an understanding of it. So that started with like the Who was my first favorite band. They got the record for me, Quadrophenia, and that was like all I listened to. I would take that.
Beautiful
I
vinyl too.
Yeah, yeah. I had my little disc man that I would take everywhere with me, and I would just like it was all I would listen to. And I think, looking back, that probably set a real precedent for the kind of drumming that I would like. Keith Moon's wild, crazy kind of style. I really, really like that. But also, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, the band. Those were kind of like the heavy rotation in my household until I discovered like more music that was like mine that I was finding out probably when I was closer to like 8 or 9 and learning about a younger generation's music and punk rock and stuff like that. But from when I was like 5, it was all like the Who all the time for me.
Nice.
Do
It's,
you remember what that first album that you went out and purchased was?
ooh,
Like you saved your money or like went out and bought for yourself?
Yeah, well, I remember a lot. I remember a lot of hand-me-downs. I had a really I developed a friendship with a woman who actually worked on the Conan O'Brien show. Her name is Debbie. Her husband plays guitar in the hardcore band H2O.
oh, okay.
Uh, and
Oh, wait, is her
so
husband, is that Rusty?
Rusty, yeah. So,
Yeah.
when I was like a kid I'd like going to see my dad at work. I would run into, I'd hang out with Debbie, and Rusty would be there occasionally. And
Cool.
Debbie, well versed in like punk rock and hardcore and stuff. She would just be like, "Hey, here's these, CDs that bands are sending in to the show," because she worked in the music side of things. And so she was giving me like promo copies of like, this album doesn't come out for another couple months or whatever, but like, here you go. So I'm getting really rad albums from like Blink 182 and Alkaline Trio and Green Day and stuff like that. So that was hugely important for me for like developing, my young tastes as they were developing. Debbie was like hugely instrumental in me learning about the music that I was like falling in love with, because she saw that I was like, oh, you're probably into this stuff, like you might like this, you might dig this. That's how I found out about like the Used and stuff,
Yeah.
which I became friends with. That's probably one of the first records that I remember buying on my own, maybe, like scrounging together whatever like chores money I could scrounge together when I
Yep.
was like 11 or 12. I think I was 11 when their first record came out. And I remember buying the first album of the Used, and Brandon Steinecker, their drummer. I've known him for now. We were just talking the other day. Like, dude, we've been like best friends for like 25 years.
Crazy.
Uh, it's totally nuts. But yeah, so probably the Used might have been one of my first like CDs I purchased on my own. But it was in that whole slew of like late 90s, early
Yeah.
2000s, punk rock that like myself and probably nearly everybody in that kind of demographic we were, heavily getting into.
Now, did you become kind of the DJ in your friend group or how? Because obviously, if you were getting everything early, were you kind of disseminating things early and becoming kind of like the go-to for the next big thing or
A
the next
little
fun
bit.
thing at least?
A little bit. I was the DJ, quote unquote, for like my ice hockey team. I remember like I would carefully curate like music that we would skate out onto the ice to,
Oh,
which
I
like
love this.
the rink that we had, we had a PA system, and I would give like a mix CD to to like the dad who's the coach or something, like put this in the PA and we'll like practice, we'll warm up to this. And so, that had some like heavy metal stuff on it, I'm sure.
You guys
Um,
had like the best music of any other team.
yeah, and I mean, I probably was like forcing it on everybody. I don't know if everyone enjoyed it, but like, yeah, I was the one in charge of like the aux cord, for my hockey team. Um, but it really was like, I don't know. I mean, I had such a like tight knit kind of relationship to the music. I didn't necessarily have a huge like social circle of people who were getting into the same music. I was definitely like the oddball out in my school. Like I was the only person into punk rock and heavy metal and goth sort of stuff like anyway. So I was kind of a misfit. Um until maybe like high school or so, when I started to finally like meet some like-minded people. I had started playing music myself, so I like as a freshman, it was super intimidating to find anybody to play music with because I just started.
Yeah.
Um, but there was a guy. He was a he was on the wrestling team, big like wrestler guy, and he had it. I knew he played guitar, and his guitar strap was a big like tire chain that you like put on your tires in the winter, and he was super intimidating, but he liked the music that I did. So I asked if he wanted to like start a band, and we did and stuff. So that's kind of where that sort of more social aspect of it started, and I started like really involving myself in the scene that was in central New Jersey at the time. There's a great venue that's not there anymore called the Internet Cafe, that was in Red Bank, and they would put on great independent, hardcore shows, whatever was kind of like budding metalcore at the
Nice.
time. Jane Doe had just come out, so you got a
Yeah.
lot of bands like ripping that off and stuff. But it was exciting and it was cool to be a part of. I only know like one or two people from that scene that like still make music to this day, and we actually like we'll see each other, out on the road from time to time and be like, hey, you and me still doing this. you know.
So then when you're in high school and I did a little bit of, did a little bit of research and I can't find any Chaos's music online. Your MySpace page was the closest I got to it and then it gave me an error message. So I was
Yeah,
I
it's because
was
I'm very good at scrubbing shit like that because it wasn't very good. No, I'm sure if you look hard enough, you can find it. I don't know why it wouldn't be available. I have copies of it. Like, we self-made a CD. It's just kids like
Yeah.
learning how to just, do like kids with ambition though. Like, we were very into I was super into like Slayer and Mastodon. um our bass player singer was super into like Radiohead and like Modest Mouse, I
All
think, and
right.
stuff. So it's like this really crazy, our one guitar player loved Black Sabbath, so we really, but we're 14, and
Yeah.
we're like figuring out like how do you, how do
That's
you
so
take
much
all of
fun.
these like influences and try to have them make sense. But we had fun. It was a lot of yeah, a lot of experimenting and just like doing all those things that you do when you're that age of learning how to book your own shows. Our guitar player's dad he ran a Dodge dealership, and he was super nice in like whenever we would have like I would book us out of state shows, he would let us like take a van off the lot, and
Oh,
his son,
wow.
his son, our guitar player, he was like just old enough. He had his learner's permit, but we were driving like completely illegally to shows on a car that we just took off his dad's lot
Love
just because
this.
he was super rad. Like, yeah, take, just don't crash or whatever. And we would
Be
do that
safe.
sort of stuff. Yeah, just all those sorts of things that you do to just figure it all out.
Yeah.
So, like whether or not our music was any good, we were kids, we were high school kids, but it was like definitely the formative experiences that then when like opportunities actually started to kind of present themselves, and I had this weird circumstance where I was still super young. I was 17 when I first played with Bruce and the E Street Band, and I was filling in for my dad, but that was all muscle memory and know-how, or fake
Right.
it till you make it, as I could from those experiences as a teenager, because it was
Yeah.
like everything I did was in service to my high school band. And I feel like that allowed them, when I started getting some phone calls about like, can you do this, can you do this, that was how it was, everything that I was trying to have the pedal meet the pavement with, that sort of stuff. And then it just started to kind of happen.
What age were you when you kind of decided that school maybe wasn't always going to be the thing and that music really, like, when did you have that mental switch that music was the career?
um
Or have you had that mental switch yet that music is the career?
yeah, I don't know if that's ever, it's like both, at the very outset, like when when we get put on this path, I feel like there's just kind of something that can't shake us off of it. It's like that's true for many of my
Yeah.
friends and peers in music. That it's like once you get gripped by it, especially if it's at like a young age, like there's just no way around it. It's something that you kind of decide, maybe out of like youthful idealism, or faith that you can see yourself, doing that as well. But there's something in it where it's just like it gets a hold of you, and you want to participate in some way, and improve yourself and make good things. And then, if those good things then catch the eye or ear of anybody else out there, that helps push it forward and all that. And so it's definitely something that like gripped me early on, probably when I was like 14, when I made the decision. I had started playing drums at 14. I was still playing ice hockey and very committed to that. But I was like, I'm doing both of these at a 50% capacity. I can't,
Right.
and I'm not getting better at either of them. I need to like dedicate myself to one, and music won out for me, all the way. And so it was probably that sort of decision when I called my hockey coach from high school that I wasn't going to be, returning to training camp or whatever it was. And that I was just going to start a band and do that. That was probably the decision. I was about like 15 or so, but
Now,
it
did you
wasn't
get,
something that I had like, it was a career in mind or something. It was just like, I'm just going to put all of my effort and attention and
yeah,
creativity into this and see where it gets me. But school was always also kind of like a thing. My mom being an educator as well, she was a high school history teacher. It was very important, in our household to do school, and I agreed. I wanted to. I had things that I wanted to go to school for, and I'm lucky. I went to a college um, that I really appreciated, because it's a smaller college, but they let me, like, I already had what I was gonna do. Like I already knew the path that I was on, and
right.
it didn't hurt that like 2 months after I started college, I started touring as a full-time musician. First filling in for my dad with Bruce, and then playing in Madball, and then Against Me, and then like all this stuff, kind of just kept happening. Um, but they were down to let me do all that and like tailor all my studies to, I could take a course that I could like tailor that to being a musician or being an
Ah,
artist in some way. And so um school only really took a back seat when it was just a logistics and time management issue.
yeah.
Like I was on tour too much. When I first joined Against Me, we had a whole itinerary of like 9 months, just like
Oh,
straight. We were just like away from home for like 9 months, which at however old I was, 20, I was 20, I think. That was all I wanted to be doing. I didn't
and
want
you
to be
guys
home
were
at
on the
all.
biggest trajectory possible at that
I just
point.
wanted to
So,
be out. I just wanted to be away from home. I just wanted to be out there making a whole bunch of racket. I've got all the energy in the world.
yeah.
Um, but being a full-time student was finally, I kind of reached a breaking point. So I had to drop out for a little bit. I put it on pause, and they were cool. They were like, whenever you want to come back, you just let us know. We'll restart you or whatever. And I did. When I left Against Me and went back to college, finished out college, and then the day I finished college was when I joined Slipknot. So it's like
Huh.
all that stuff kind of, school just, it didn't necessarily take a back seat, but it was kind of like I had to put it to the side
And
for a minute.
what was your major?
Business and technology
Okay.
was the specific major at Stevens Institute of Technology. So it's a tech
Cool.
school, but I was in the first incarnation of like what their business school
Nice.
was doing. And I've visited recently and seen what the school is doing and talked to some students and stuff. It's really gotten to a level now that's like super interesting, and it's a great place. I love living in, it was in Hoboken, New Jersey. So I was right outside New York City, to where, and I'm sure we'll talk about like being young and going to shows and stuff. Ever since I was 12 years old, I was taking the train up from where I lived in New Jersey, central New Jersey. I would take the train up, hour and a half to go to the city and go to a show at Irving Plaza or Roseland
Yeah.
Ballroom or CBGB's or, Webster Hall, whatever. All these venues that I grew to love as a young person from when I was like 12 years old. And then when I was, in my late teens, early 20s, I was living right outside New York City. So I was just in the fervor of like all of that
It's amazing.
crazy creative energy and meeting so many people, going to art gallery openings all the time, and just an amazing time to be around New York City. And
Wow.
I saw a meaningful show near like every night of the week. So in addition to school, that was like one of the reasons why I wanted to be there, is because I could be very like very close to a, burgeoning
Yeah.
creative scene.
Amazing.
That's awesome. Now that you mentioned concerts, I do want to know, do you remember your first show?
My first show definitely would have been The Who performing Quadrophenia
Oh,
when I was 5. And
okay.
that, I think, that was the introduction. That was why my parents wanted to show me The Who, was because they were coming to Madison Square Garden to play Quadrophenia,
Cool.
and they wanted me to see it, but also like to understand what I was seeing. So I had to get familiar with the music and stuff. But yeah, I remember being on my dad's shoulders, like singing along and stuff. Super fun. I have a very vague, photographic memory of it. But I remember that was my first concert.
What's the first
I
concert?
can see how
Oh,
memorable it was for you. Like as
yeah.
soon as you lit up the second you started talking about it, like it must have left a big imprint
Yeah,
on you.
yeah,
What
for
was
sure.
what was the first one you snuck into?
First show I snuck into was probably, the only one that really comes to mind is it was an amazing show to sneak into. I piggybacked off of some friends who were going to see No Doubt supporting Blink 182 in
Oh,
2004. When
okay.
Blink 182's Untitled record had just come out, Rock Steady was the current No Doubt album. So it
Yes.
was just like both of those bands at such magical times in their trajectory. I think The Living End from
We
Australia
won't.
opened that show.
Oh, we
Yeah.
won't tell you that we saw No Doubt and Blink 182 with like La Luna in Portland in the early 90s.
Yeah, cool.
Those were
That's awesome.
the I think one of the best Blink shows I saw was it was Blink 182 headlining, and the openers were Kara's Flowers, who became Maroon 5,
Hmm.
and the Aquabats.
Wow,
And it
what
was
a show
Aquabats with Travis Barker.
with
So
Travis on drums.
it
Wow.
was just I just remember the Aquabats show was incredible. All the stage antics and the lighting of fire and just everything they were
Yeah.
doing was just amazing.
Where was that?
That was at so it would have been at La Luna, and it would have been in
Okay.
1996. No, I guess it would have been a little earlier. So 1990, somewhere between 93 and 95.
Wow.
But
That's amazing.
it was awesome.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, so I remember sneaking in. It was, I can't believe you couldn't get away with it nowadays, but like I literally was like behind my friend who had a ticket, and I literally just like
I've
nearly
been
like
there.
just hid behind him
Uh-huh.
as the
Like
usher
movie
was like
style,
checking
right?
his ticket, and I just went like whoop and went in. I didn't have a ticket and I made it. It was like one of the greatest
yeah.
shows. Yeah, super memorable. But yeah, I don't know, I didn't really break the rules all that much, but that was one show that I do remember sneaking into. Yeah.
Now, when obviously I know you've got an obvious love of hardcore. Uh, how was playing with Madball after probably loving everything about that scene and that world? How was that experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, talk about like just jumping right into the lion's den as far as like, I was 19 years old, fresh off of really my first tour ever, ostensibly with my like extended family, people I've known,
Right.
forever. But still a challenge, But I knew that that would come to its natural conclusion, and it did. And I was out in LA doing a performance for the Guitar Center Drum Off, and I got an email from a guy I had actually met at a Blink-182 show, no less, who I knew was the guitar player from Madball, and he and I talked about like hockey, being hockey fans. And he sent me a message or an email, was like, "Hey, like I saw you're doing this drum off thing. Like, are there any drummers out there who might be a good fit for Madball? We're going on tour in like 2 weeks, and we need a drummer." And I was like, "I'll do it." And he was like, "Really? You'd be into that?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. That's everything I've like ever wanted to do." And and so it's gonna be like a 6 week tour in Europe, in from like January to February, just like absolutely, I all new to me, my first time in a bus, and that bus was 31 people on
Oh
one
my
bus.
God. Oh my God.
Uh, yeah, it was an incredible lineup. It was a band from Belgium called The Setup, Death Before Dishonor, Cruel Hand, Terror, and Madball, all
Damn.
on one bus. And it was insanity. And that was my first time, like really, you know, like doing it.
Welcome
And
to the neighborhood.
yeah, and just learning. I mean, every day I was just like, it's so much input, so much to like try to live up to and stuff. Playing directly after Terror is no
It's
easy
not an
feat.
easy task.
Nope, nope. But like, so, it was all the energy that I'd ever
Yeah.
wanted to be around. And of course, like, yeah, like being, growing up in New Jersey, being around, going to New York hardcore shows all the time and stuff, knowing, H2O through my friend Debbie and her
Yeah.
husband Rusty. That's how I kind of like knew people in this sort of world, and that kind of H2O and Dropkick Murphys and Sick of It All and Murphy's Law and stuff. I hadn't met really the guys in Madball before. Their guitar player had just kind of randomly hit
Yeah.
me up at the time, and I met Freddie walking on stage to our first show
Oh my
together.
God.
Like, that's just kind of how it all went down. But quite an experience. It was, at 19, I was also kind of like, I'm just figuring out what it is that I want to do in
Yeah.
this sort of thing. So, as amazing of an opportunity and exciting, and I was learning so much, I was also like, I don't know if this is entirely the right fit for me. It's a band that started a year before I was born,
Right.
and so there was a lot of legacy, a lot of history, a lot of dynamics that I just wanted to try and see what else is happening there. But an amazing opportunity, and learned a lot, made my first record, um which is so nuts. I actually just saw that it had like a 15-year anniversary version of it
2010,
came
yeah.
out. And I'm like, geez, like, where'd time go? But
Well,
yeah, yeah.
you mentioned legacy, and you've had kind of your career has kind of been built around joining projects. And now you're at a point where you get to kind of put out your own thing and kind of create, who you are going to be moving forward. Um, so I know I read somewhere where you started writing, obviously started writing music in high school. And when you sent me the press pack for the new single, I got to hear you sing. And so how's it feel? How's it feel to have a voice like your voice on a song that's going to be out there?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it feels nuts. It's different, I mean, that song, like Drown Fountain specifically, is such a weird song that I know I've been, the first demo I made of that is back in like 2013 or something.
Wow.
And I was working on it forever and just had different iterations and would pull different folks in to work on it. And like in a band context, and it just like never really felt all that right. But I still just have held on to it, and it never showed itself that it wanted drums on it. I'm like, okay, so it's a song that doesn't want any drums on it. Okay. And this thing that was calling to me that I was like, I have to sing this part on it, and I think it'll just be me, so I just have to figure that out. Yeah, I mean, to your to your comment earlier, it's like, yes, I have spent so much time, playing with different folks and established groups and so on, which is like always a fun challenge to me, of like coming into something that exists, and for whatever reason that I'm being asked to join in on the fun, seeing what I can bring to it. And those are things that I don't necessarily get to determine. I'm just kind of, I have a thing that has, for whatever reason, these people are approaching, and I'm fortunate to to find myself in the mix, uh, which is an enjoyable thing, just as like kind of creating things on my own over here is. So I enjoy all those dynamics, and even currently, like I just made a record with a band called Fuming Mouth that's
Maybe
coming
mouth.
out in a couple weeks or next week, and that's another great example of just like an existing group that it's like, hey, we want you to play on a thing, and I agree. And I'm like, yeah, I think that would be great. I think this could be a good fit, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
But no, but there's and whether I'm writing in the context of any one of these groups, I have stuff that is just like, I'm always working on things on my own, whether or not I'm bringing these to a group setting. And there's just kind of been like a reserve of stuff that I've never felt like belonged with the character of any of those
Right.
things. It's a song I'm not going to present to Slipknot. It's not a song I'm going to, present to Fuming Mouth or something like
Right.
that. You know what I mean? So I've had this stuff. And as a multi-instrumentalist, like I started on guitar when I was
Okay.
9 years old. So that was my first instrument. And then I picked up on drums when I was like 14. But guitar has always been what I've written on. That's what
Okay.
when I go to like write a song, that's usually the first thing that I'll pick up. And so I've had this, like, a lot of stuff, a lot of demos of things. Um, and it sort of got shelved when, you know, long story that I don't have the time to to dive into in this conversation. But I kind of had to put that on ice just to focus on one specific band,
Yeah.
and so I didn't have the opportunity to share that with the world. So it kind of was like, well, if I'm working on all this stuff, but I don't have the freedom to share it, I'm kind of like, that's the other half of the equation is
Yeah.
like, I can really enjoy the things that I'm making on my own, but if I'm not allowed to share it with the world, then it kind of is like, well, that's the other part of it. You get to set it free. And as an
Yeah.
artist, you get to just like move on. You get to be like, okay, I completed that, and now it's out in the world living its own life, and I have to now focus on the next thing. So I've kind of had this like backlog of all this stuff, just like I don't know how many songs, probably close to like 100 different like demos of songs in various stages of completion. Um, that about like 2.5 years ago, I started to really revisit and figure out, like, like all this stuff that I've had, it it merits some attention to see what can be done here. And I think so, a lot of us who spend so much time on the road and meet friends who were always like, oh, I really like what you do and you dig what I do, we should make a side band or something, and then it never happens.
Right.
And that's just the nature of everybody's all
Yep.
busy, and it's just what happens. But I kind of had this idea where I have all these like instrumental things, for the most part. um I kind of want to approach all my friends who I've wanted to, like, oh, maybe this person would be a good collaborator on this, and maybe these people could get in the mix on this. And I was like, maybe that's how I get this stuff that I've worked on for so long and I'm so close to that I don't even know what to do with it anymore. But how about I present it to, some folks who can just work on one song? It's not a
Yeah,
whole project. We're just going to tailor this down to one song.
I love
Um,
that.
so so my first stab at that was with my friend George Clark from Deaf Heaven, where I had this song and I was like, hey, this is a thing I'm working on, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know if this is like a band or because it's just me playing everything. But like, I think your voice would be great on this. I'm not going to sing on it, so I think you should sing on this. And he was like, I will. And I went out to LA where he is, and I went into a studio with him, not knowing what to expect. This is a whole new project. I don't really know what
Yeah.
I'm doing here. And George just came in, and I watched him just lay it down in like one take,
Oh,
and
Jesus.
I was blown
Wow.
away. It was one of the most artistically fulfilling experiences to
Ah, I
like
bet.
have my friend who I really admire and I really appreciate his art and what he does, to then lend that in a way to bring this thing that I've been working on across the finish line, where I'm like, oh my God, that's what that needs to be. Now I get to be done with this, and I can share this. I'm excited to share this.
Yeah.
And similarly, with like artwork and stuff, I'm a visual artist myself, but as the collaborative nature of this project started to kind of percolate, I was talking to a friend of mine, Paul Romano, who is an amazing visual artist. His album covers with bands like Mastodon, The Red Chord,
That's
Trivium. His work is incredible. He and I were talking about it, and I was like, "Hey, what would you think of like? I've got these in mind that I'm thinking of doing the artwork for, but I'm kind of like I'm so focused on the music and getting that all together, which is a whole effort in and of itself, just wrangling so many schedules together of
yeah.
like many people, different songs, different, schedules and whatever. Um, and he was like, I would like to create the visual identity, this character for this project. I'm like, if you're down, I would love it. That expands the collaborative nature of this whole
Yeah.
thing. Like, yes, it is music I'm putting out under my own name, but it's like I consider it like the anti-solo project. It's not solo in the sense that it's just me. It's like I'm getting this stuff to a place where I'm comfortable presenting it to
Right.
people, and then they are the missing ingredient that I don't have on my own. So I did that with another song with my friends Nowhere to Run, who are members of the band Code Orange,
Okay.
because it was more of a song that like felt like it needed their teeth in it, their vibe in it. And this newest song, Drown Fountain, I've been at a loss with what to do with it, but I was turned on to the music of this band Soft Cult from Canada, and Mercedes' voice just was,
So pretty.
it spoke to me, like to my core, and I became such a fan, and just introduced myself, and we became friends, and I was just kind of like, hey, I've got this thing that I'm working on. Like, I think your voice would be amazing on it. Would you be at all open to singing on it? So Mercedes and her sibling Phoenix, they've worked on this song to get it across the finish line, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm super super excited. And these are three songs of a greater body of work that I'm kind
Right.
of like just kind of getting out there in little bits and pieces, and the greater picture sort of starts to show itself. So there's more on the way.
I
um
love that.
Drown Fountain is certainly like the biggest step out of my comfort zone I think I've ever taken, because it's not anything that I'm used to doing. I'm not used to not playing on my drums. I'm not used to
Right.
singing. I'm not used to playing acoustic guitars and stuff. But it's a challenge nonetheless, and it is what I've always wanted it to be. So,
That's awesome. I was
it's just
telling Courtney when I was listening to it this morning, when I was listening again this morning, I was telling Courtney it reminds me a lot of like a Portishead meets Ministry, Nine Inch Nails, but
whoa,
that like that early gritty, like late 80s, early 90s Ministry sound.
So good.
cool.
And yeah, it's really well done, dude.
I
It's a
appreciate that. Thank you.
fantastic song.
Thanks a
So
lot.
it
Appreciate
sounds like you're so busy right now. What are you doing to relax? Like, what are you doing to like just
it.
take a minute
Having a
for you?
child, and stuff is what I'm doing to relax. No, I mean, I like to have a full plate, really. I mean, that's how I've always been. I've never, I've always just, and that extends to like any project I've ever been a part of. Like if I'm a part of something, I really like to get involved. I really like to, give it all the energy and love and passion that I can behind it. Um, so as I've kind of like, when my wife and I found out that she was pregnant, like it was sort of a conscious decision, at least from, you know, I had a confluence of circumstances of like, my exit from Slipknot, and I had this surgery that had me laid up for quite a while, for about 6 months. I um, had hip surgery, and I had to like relearn how to walk and stuff, and it was really, really gnarly to get through that period of time. And I spent like a year and a half or so after that playing with my friends Suicidal Tendencies. And we spent a really fun year out with Metallica on their stadium tour. That was an incredible experience. But once I had this kind of thing at the end of 9 months, we were going to be creating a person. Uh, I I sort of wanted to take a little bit of a step back and Suicidal. We had a busy schedule coming up. I kind of looked at my paternity leave that I feel like I'm sort of on at the moment. Um, was like that was important to me, that I wanted to be present for my daughter being born, um and just like getting used to this like whole life shift, right? So in the ways that like coming off the road, and like that's a whole adjustment to me. I've like this is the first summer I've had at home in like 15 years or something.
Oh.
Like it's I never, excuse me, 4th of July just passed, and my wife was like, "Yeah, you've never been home for 4th of July." I'm like, "Wow, yeah, I guess you're right." But so that's been enjoyable, and it has given me a lot of time to. I've been calling it just being a studio rat. Like I've been more of a studio rat than anything these last 6, 7 months. Making a lot of records that I'm really, really excited about. A lot of stuff that I'm not like, they're not things that I'm like diving in with both feet necessarily
Right.
just yet, but like, I'm really enjoying this kind of like period where I'm playing with all sorts of different folks, and it's like allowed me to experiment with different things. Some things that I still can't really announce, but things that are like way outside of my style that I've always kind of played, which I really enjoy.
Nice.
Like I've always kind of viewed, like aging gracefully with the music that I'm making. Never wanting to try to be like a version of my like 23-year-old self,
Right.
really. I like the idea of making music that feels inspired to me, and in where I'm at. But so yeah, that's kind of like this period where it's a total shift and like kind of cleaning of the slate. I've kind of referred to what I've been up to this whole year as like creative spring cleaning. I've
Mm.
had so much of this material I've had for so long. Drown Fountain, a song I've had in my pocket for 13 years, and I finally get to set it free in a couple days. um that's really good. Like I need that for sure. And I'm able to be present and like engaged with my daughter as she's just
Awesome.
a little person right now. And that, of course, like I kind of see, like as I sort of come out of this paternity leave and stuff, it's like, yeah, I want to be doing more of these things and being out there, and hopefully some of these projects will be hitting the road and stuff, and always kind of just being available for the way life just kind of you know happens. And so yeah, it's like it's a very weird and odd kind of thing to be just like many feet in different places. I haven't really done that much
Mm.
before. I've always kind of just been like, I'm focused on this one thing. But it is really nice to be able to like get some creative energy out with people I really enjoy, people I respect, and making a whole bunch of racket. I'm liking it for sure.
I
That's
love it.
awesome.
Okay, I'm so curious. What lullabies are you singing to your daughter? And I ask this because I, our daughter, our household every night well, for years, a whole concert. Our daughter demanded for bedtime, and we ran out of songs that were probably
Mhm.
appropriate. So we sang the wildest songs to our daughter. Sex and
Nice.
Candy
I
was
always like to say that Sex and Candy was kind of like the constant song that evolved as she got older.
because
That's
Like
great.
we started to
you could
under
only sing
dance
so
on it.
many
Sure.
lyrics first.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You gotta. She
But
can't
at some
catch on
point,
to you. Like,
yeah, you sing songs that like are lull, but also that you love as well. So I'm just so curious,
uh,
what lullabies are you singing?
boy, that's a good question. I mean, she hears a lot of music. Like we play a lot of music for her. For right now, I mean, she's 3 weeks old, so I've only had a little bit of time to get used to this. Right now, she likes a song that my wife and I have created called "The Cool Guy Walk,"
Oh,
uh,
love it.
Oh,
which seems to be what like gets her to
uh-huh.
calm down in some sorts of sometimes. Where I'll just be carrying her.
That'll be single number 4 from the album.
Yeah, maybe I'll release "The Cool Guy Walk,"
You
which
send
was
us that, and we'll send you our famous song called Squawk.
All about our chickens,
okay.
that's that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was well, it was born out of like I was trying to calm her down and walking her around our living room, but I was doing it in this like really weird kind of like
Cool
skeleton guy
guy.
walk,
So,
and my wife was like, "Wow, cool, what a cool guy walk you're doing right now." So now it's just the cool guy walk, the cool guy walk. So that's how she gets lulled back to being calm right now is the cool guy walk. It doesn't work all the time, but I
But
try.
enough that it's now a thing. I feel this so hard, having gone
oh
through that
man.
stage.
hmm
Thank you so much for sharing that. That made my whole day.
Sure. Yeah.
So, on every one of our episodes with our guests, I listen to your songs. And then, as a former teacher, I try to find a song that we could do in the classroom and kind of connect a lesson to it. And
Cool.
so I went through, and Drone Operator was the song that I chose.
Okay.
Get my glasses off because
We went back. I started her with Hesitation Wound and we crept up.
Oh,
So
cool. All
we went
right.
through all sorts. It was so fun.
Rad.
So I named the lesson The Rhythm of Wish and Whir. And the purpose of the lesson would be to identify how writers use tension and rhythm in writing and understand the connection to drum's role in music, and then apply this to their own writing, utilizing specific writing methods. So I'd begin by playing the song Drone Operator, giving kids or students a copy of the lyrics. And their purpose while listening would be how are drums used to create tension and release in the music? How are they used to enhance the vocal lines? And then have them mark that in the text. And then when the song's done, talk about it in their groups and what do they think and where did they find it in the text and what specifically did they hear? How did the sounds change? How did it push things along? How did it pull back? What did they think? And then talk about it in the whole group. And then talk about how do drums create that suspense and how do they work together lyrically with the lyrics, but as well musically throughout the piece. And then talk about how do we do the same thing in writing with words and language in the context of a larger story, but also in smaller context within poems, within a line of a poem, within the actual word that we're using. And then what are those devices, onomatopoeias, alliteration, all those things that we use? And then brainstorm a sound list. What are all of those different wonderful words that we could use? So then the task, create rhythm with words. So using the words from the word bank or ones that they love, create a poem that shows what you've learned about rhythm and the flow of writing. Play, explore, and have fun. And as always, feel free to illustrate. So I'm also a visual artist, so I always encourage kids to illustrate.
Yeah.
So I did one of my own, and it'll be hard to see, but we'll send it to you
we'll
as
send it
well.
to you right after this.
Cool. I
So,
love what I see. Yeah.
and then here's what I wrote. So it's called The Wish and Whir of Now. Some days I screech into the day, whiz, bang, bam. Others I clatter through, all clink, crackle, crunch. And some days I just flutter, alive in the whoosh and whir of now.
I love that.
Thanks.
Nice. That's so that well, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome that you picked up on all those things. Especially the fact like I love the wish and whir because this was a song. I mean, I know I was talking about how I primarily write with like guitar and stuff. This was actually a song that started out on the drums for sure.
Mm.
It's very interesting because so and I came up with I come up with like a sequence that I wanted, like I felt like just in a percussion sense, I called it this like cycloning drum beat that it starts out with that I've always really appreciated what my friends in the band Code Orange do with like electronics and their guy Shade. He does all these wild percussive things with electronics and their singer Jamie, he was also the drummer and lead singer, and so he knows percussion and he knows
Nice.
drums and the way that lyrics flow and push and pull against things. And so I've always really loved that dynamic of my friend's band, and I've toured with them many times over the world and across the world and stuff. And so when I had this like series of drum beats, I was like, hey, so here's a thing. It's just a song of drums, and I want to figure out how to work with you guys on it because I'm like, Jamie, I hear your voice on it. Shade, I hear your Shade things on it. And they're a production duo called Nowhere to Run now. And so I was like, I think we got something here. Let's explore it. And so we just kind of started shaping it together, but based on these like root things of like percussive cyclones, as I was kind of calling them. And then Jamie and I, when we I got together with them, they're in Pittsburgh. He and I sat down together and kind of just like collaborated on lyrics right there of figuring out, like you said, kind of more of that like tone poem sort of things. You like I almost find like lyrics to me. I'm not the most experienced lyricist, but in this project I do right. And so it comes in more like sounds, like you're saying, like what is the sound of what I want to portray here, and then what are the words that fit the sound, or I'm always kind of like writing down little words or phrases and stuff, and I'll kind of peel back in my notes of like what I have and see if anything sort of fits the character, the tone of what I want to be expressing, and then kind of try to mold them together, kind of
Right.
massage them back and forth into that. With Jamie and with the song Drone Operator, it's like it's so fast, it's so aggressive. It's like, and I've played a lot of that music in my life. But kind of in this first way where I'm creating this thing, kind of start to finish, it's really like they were more in like a co-producing kind of role, but also just kind of helping me like, is this a good riff for this? And how do we, this and that? Um, that's sort of how we put it together. So being myself, like the songs I've always kind of like withheld from any other kind of group scenario, or it's always the weirder ones, it's
Yeah.
like Sandstone and Drown Fountain and a bunch of the other things that I'll have coming out that are a part of this. It's always the weirder ones that aren't necessarily the like hard hitting thrashy
Right.
metal things. This one was though, so it's kind of like I've never been the sole person really directing all of that before. So to have my friends like give their energy into it and just trying to find
That's
like
cool.
creative inspiration in our, in the room together. We got it. And I'm really happy with it. But that's so cool that you've showed it to your class and led with like the rhythm of things because it all did like the drums are the big part of that. And I think like for the project that's under my own name, I think people might kind of assume that drums are like very forward. They are on that
Right.
song, but it's like I kind of do have to step to the side as the drummer a little bit, and it gives me a greater understanding of like everything else that surrounds the
Yeah.
drums. That when I'm mixing things, I'm not just listening from a drummer's perspective of like make the drums louder. Like I have to understand all these things are in the balance. So it's been a really great um um creative endeavor in that sense, but I'm so glad that you picked up on like the percussive root of it because it all started with like that first drum beat was like that was the first thing I had for the song. Cool that you picked up on that.
Well, thanks. I loved it. The
Thank you.
interplay between the drums and everything else was just like amazing as soon as I grabbed it and thought this will be a great learning tool for kids to be able to make that leap between literature and drums
Oh,
and
that's cool. Yeah.
feel it with their body. I'm a
On the
very,
tension, yeah. It's
yeah,
you're tense throughout the whole song and then it just kind of smacks you in the face with the ending of it. That's sort of the idea.
There's a
yeah.
great poetry book. I think it's a Langston Hughes poetry book, but it's built around Giant Steps,
Mhm.
Coltrane album. And it's a really, we were talking about jazz poetry and just that idea of the more percussive sounds, like of scatting or like, things that are really a physical form of just rhythmic movement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have like a form of synesthesia, and that song for me, the feel of moving and back and movement and back and the physicality of it is palpable so much on such a core level. It was just wonderful. So
I
I
really
loved
appreciate
it.
that. Thanks for taking that away. That's really cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for being a part of the Singles family today. This was awesome to have you on. Truly an honor. And I look forward to whatever comes next. I'm hoping Fuming Mouth might head toward the Portland area, and we can
Yeah,
see a show at some point.
I think we do in September, I believe.
Oh, cool,
Yeah, I'll update you. But yeah,
awesome,
there'll be lots of stuff. I love coming to Portland, so there's no
cool,
reason to keep me away. I love coming.
awesome. Well, we look forward to continuing the future there.
Thanks for listening and following along.